Hey fellas, me Trapper here. Welcome to another episode of Stupid Ass Game Laws, except this time we're not going to talk about a stupid law. We're going to talk about what I consider to be an unconstitutional case law. And I'm going to explain exactly how the lying liars and the lying court system have turned the Supreme Court ruling around so that they can do any damn thing they want. So what am I talking about? Well, in the vast majority of states in this country, a game warden can come on your property for any reason and do pretty much anything that he wants as long as he is in uniform. He doesn't have to have a warrant. He doesn't have to have suspicion. He doesn't have to have probable cause. He doesn't even have to have a reason. He can simply say, I'm going to go walk through those woods and see what's going on. And there is nothing you can do about it, even if there's a fence and even if it's posted no trespassing. So what about the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America, which states the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So how did they get around that? Well, over 100 years ago, there was a Supreme Court case called Hester versus the United States. The Hesters were a family that were suspected of being moonshiners. And so the revenue agents, and this was 1924, the revenue agents had received information from a confidential source that the Hesters were moonshiners. And I'm going to read just a little bit of the actual decision handed down by the Supreme Court. Okay, now this is important. I know this is boring, but this is important. So Oliver Wendell Holmes, Justice of the Supreme Court, said, the witnesses whose testimony is objected to were revenue officers. In consequence of information, now that's critical. In other words, the revenue officers had information about the Hesters and them being bootleggers. So they had a case, they had information, an informant said these guys are up to no good. So they went towards the house of Hester's father, where the plaintiff lived, and as they approached, they saw Mr. Henderson, drive near to the house. So they saw a guy named Henderson come up to the Hester's house. And they're there because they had information that there was a crime being committed. So the revenue officers concealed themselves from 50 to 100 yards away, and they saw Hester come out of the house and hand Henderson a quart bottle. So they're sitting there watching. They've got the place staked out, and they see him come out with a quart bottle and hand it to him. So you see, now they've got some probable cause. They had information that there was a crime going on. They go out there, they sit, they stake the place out, and now they see suspicious behavior. Making sense. So the revenue officers gave an alarm. Hey, stop, put your hands up, you're under arrest, whatever. So Hester went to a car nearby, took a gallon jug from it, and he and Henderson ran. One of the officers pursued and fired a pistol. So Hester dropped his jug, which broke, but it kept about a quart of its contents in the jug, even though the jug cracked open. Henderson also threw his bottle away. The jug and bottle both contained what the officers, being experts, recognized as moonshine whiskey, that is, whiskey illicitly distilled and said to be easily recognizable. Now this is interesting stuff. The other officer entered the house, but being told there was no whiskey there, left it. They didn't tear the house apart. They didn't handcuff everybody and put them out on the curb for 5 or 6 or 7 hours like the FBI likes to do to people, especially conservatives. They didn't rip the house up. They simply said, okay, if there's no whiskey here, we'll leave. But when they left the house, Outside, they found a jar that had been thrown out and broken, and that also contained whiskey. While the officers were there, other cars stopped at the house, but they were spoken to by Hester's father, and they drove off. See, once again, they didn't line everybody up, handcuff them, throw them on the ground, have helicopters circling overboard. None of that. These were reasonable people. The officers had no warrant for search or arrest, and so the Hesters took it all the way to the Supreme Court, saying that the search and seizure was invalid because they didn't have a warrant. Okay, so it goes on and on and on. Typical court ruling. So what the Supreme Court ruled was, since the evidence was not obtained by entering into the house, in other words, they went into the house, nothing was there, they didn't seize anything, all of the evidence was seized out in what they called an open field outside. So the court finally rules that it is enough to say that the special protection accorded by the Fourth Amendment to the people in their persons, houses, papers, and effects is not extended to the open fields. The distinction between the latter and the house is as old as English common law. I don't have a problem with any of that. So just to review, the open fields doctrine was based on a case over 100 years ago where the cops had confidential informant information. They had reason to believe that a crime was in progress. They went and they observed and they staked out, and when they observed suspicious behavior, then they moved in to make an arrest, and that is how it went down. So what about game wardens coming onto your property? Well, there was a case here in Tennessee. I told you there was a handful of cases, a handful of states that have rejected the open fields doctrine. Tennessee is one of them. It took years of fighting in the legislature to do it. Had a guy, had some property. He goes out on his property and he finds a game camera. Well, he didn't put that game camera there. It wasn't his. Somebody had come onto his property and set up their own game camera. So he takes the game camera off the tree. He takes it back to his house. And he says, you know what, I'm going to wait and see if this guy has enough balls to come knock on my door and want his camera back. And then he can explain to me what he was doing on my property. Well, they came and knocked on his door all right. It was a whole Delta Force squad of TWRA agents, Tennessee Wildlife Resources Association agency, excuse me. You see, the game wardens had come onto his property without a warrant. But unlike the Hester case, there was no investigation, there was no suspicious behavior, there was no probable cause, there was no stakeout. They just decided to go on his land and put a camera up to see what the hell was going on. And then they had the gall to tell him that he was guilty of theft. He had stolen government property. So anyway, it went through the legislature. It was a big to-do. But Tennessee has officially rejected the open fields doctrine. So we're one of the states here where they can no longer just wander around your property for the hell of it and do whatever they want. There's a case ongoing in Alabama. Guy went out, saw his game camera, was going to check his game camera. Somebody had come in and turned his game camera around where it was facing the tree that it was strapped to. Well, joke's on them, because you see, that was the bait camera. He had another camera up in a tree, about 20 feet up in a tree, that was watching the bait camera. And the dumbass that turned the camera around wasn't smart enough to look up in the tree and see the other camera, so he caught the guy on film. Yeah. Happened to be an Alabama game warden that came onto the property. Once again, the guy was not under any investigation. There was no suspicion, no probable cause, no reason to be there, no confidential informant, nothing. They just decided they were going to go and see what was out there. And when they saw the game camera, they didn't want to be outed as having come on the property, so they turned the damn thing around. I think there's a case ongoing in Pennsylvania right now, and these are being legislated by the ILA, Institute for Legislative Action. But here's the deal. I honestly don't have a problem with the open fields doctrine as it was applied back in 1924. So if you had information, if you're a game warden and you had information that there was night hunting going on, and you decide to go stake the place out, and then you hear a boom in the middle of the night and you see a deer run across the road bleeding, in my opinion, go check it out. Go do your job. I don't have a problem with that. But that's not what's going on with these people. These people, you give them an inch and they take a yard. And so what they're doing is they're just deciding, I'm just going to go on that piece of property and see what the hell is going on. I'm going to go over there and put my own cameras up. I'm going to go over there and disable their cameras. And you see, the warden in Alabama, he didn't commit theft. He didn't commit vandalism. He didn't hurt the camera. He just reoriented the camera so that it wouldn't take his picture. What a bunch of lying scumbags. You see how they take a perfectly reasonable court ruling, in my opinion, perfectly reasonable, the Hester doctrine, and they turn it and they tweak it so that it gives them license to go anywhere they want, for any reason they want, and do any damn thing they want. But if you question any of these people, they say, oh, well, the Supreme Court rules the Hester doctrine, and it's perfectly legal, and there's case law, there's established case law, and this, that, and the other. It's because the lying liars and the bastards in the courts have taken the original intent of that ruling and turned it into an open spigot. It's bullshit. And I have absolutely no respect for these assholes that think they can just go on anybody's property, anywhere, at any time, and do any damn thing they want in the name of official business. They can all get fucked as far as I'm concerned. To hell with them. I have no problem with a warden doing his job. I have no problem with them catching bad guys. No problem at all. But that's not what they're doing. They have put themselves above the law, where the law doesn't apply to them. And you know what? I've talked to a couple of them personally, one-on-one. I had one of them in Alabama tell me, I've got a license to poach. He told me how he used his state-issued night vision gear to find game cameras on people's property and disable the game cameras and then shoot whatever the hell he wanted to shoot. And there was nothing anybody could do about it. He told me that to my face. You know why? Because they don't care. Because they're above the law. So anyway, that's the open fields doctrine, and that is the legal justification for these assholes doing what the hell they want to do. I think there are 10 states that have officially rejected the open fields doctrine. You'd have to check into your state, and it's like moving heaven and earth to get the legislature to do anything about it. And the only reason we got it done here in Tennessee is because the case was so egregious, it was so outrageous, and because in the state of Tennessee, it's written as a constitutional right to be able to hunt and fish. Not every state is that fortunate. Anyway, thought you'd want to know the legalities and the illegalities of the legal system. Like a judge once said, this isn't a court of justice, this is a court of law. Don't come in here looking for justice. Now, if you're interested in this type of content and you want more, a lot more, you can go to meattrapper.com, click on the button that says Poaching Manuals, and check out Walk with the Wild Man. There are 3 volumes of this book, and I can promise you this book is not only entertaining, but it is very, very educational when it comes to unconventional methods for putting food on the table. I guarantee you, you will not be disappointed. Now, small batch printing is expensive. This current printing is the last printing at the old price. So after these are gone, the next batch coming in, the price of the books are going up and the price of postage is going up because USPS just raised their prices again. So anyway, if you're looking for some very entertaining and very educational, unconventional material when it comes to putting food on your table, check out Walk with the Wild Man.